Hi, garden rebels. Hey, have you noticed during this warm time that your plants are really growing during this heat, especially during the warm evening times? They're pushing on some growth. So I wanted to keep you up to date on the next step, on what to do next with all of this growth. There are a few plants I'm just randomly picking to watch out for, just to keep a little bit tighter, enjoy the blooms a little bit longer, keep them going so we can go all the way into October with this wonderful summer feel. First plant pick, of course, that comes to mind that I always enjoy every summer. It grows fast. It's rewarding because you can see the difference in its growing. And it's these types of coleus, especially the sun-tolerant coleus, which I think is just the most amazing invention. We can enjoy all those crazy, unique colors of coleus in a much more sun-friendly area. So it used to be really just the afternoon shade, but now much more sun. Now on the coleus, I've noticed with this summer heat, we're getting blooms. Now a whole group of you gardeners enjoy the blooms, and if that's your cup of tea, run with it. But for other folks, sometimes it's just keeping it neat and clean and a bit more tame. And of course the blooms, cutting back the blooms, snipping them right off, just like that, just like that, just like that, keeps the plant much more compact. Now, if you have coleuses in your window boxes and your containers, you'll notice that oftentimes it is outpacing its companion plants. So we've got to do something about that. But the question is, we've got these beautiful leaves and we don't want to cut those off. Here is an option. Now on the coleus, take a look. It has these stems and then the leaves, stems and leaves. So what you can do is cut the stem down to the next set of leaves. So you can pinch it off like this, something like that. Or if you're much more exact, much more detailed, you can take your pair of pruners and snip it that way. So you'll take that to the next bract and just cut that just like that and leave the next set of leaves on there. So I'm taking this, something like that. So now I'm at half the height of what it used to be. So this keeps it much more compact. Now, you've clipped that back, you're a little bit worried, oh, did I just destroy my amazing summer creation? No, hang tight, have faith, because from these cuts, we'll have that branching split off, and coleus is another one that rewards you quickly. It will become much more bushy this way and leaf out quickly. One more explanation so we can all understand the why. Now here is a coleus that has been cut back pretty drastically, as you can see. Not many leaves to look at, and there's always a worry that this is what we're going to look at here till Labor Day. But It really goes to town, so you have to have faith. Now, one explanation now is that I've cut this here, as you can see. This node and this node and this tiny node and this node are all going to branch out. So we'll have a nice little covering, an umbrella right here of beautiful foliage in a little while. Same with this guy too. You see that, how that's been cut? This little node and this little node are going to start growing as well, and that will take off nicely. So just so you understand, when we cut down, we're going to cut it down to that next node intersection and then get that branching from there forward. And one more thing about coleus. Coleus is cool. Used a lot of scientific labs, by the way, just on how it responds to different growth hormones and growth studies, and just used a lot in science. So it's a very giving plant. Helps us all. And speaking of pruning back or not pruning back, if you have strawberries, you've seen these beautiful runners. Now they're called runners. They stem from the mother plant and go running along. A trick, yes, you may clip those right back and keep them just as is. But another trick is you can plant these runners. Let me show you just real quick. Take a pot of soil, a good potting soil. Of course, we use container power. We also use our root power, make sure all 13 essential nutrients are present. We just plant those in there just like this. It's helpful, by the way, if you take a stake of some sort and then just plug it in there like that to hold the plant in place. Now, your instincts is going to want to cut off that umbilical cord of a runner, but hold back. What we want to do is water it in place, care for it in place, and as soon as this is rooted out nicely, you can then cut off that umbilical cord. So 1, 2, 3 new plants you can give as gifts or grow more strawberries in your own garden. Thought I'd better include hydrangeas because next to roses, it's one of the most recognized plants around. And by the way, incidentally, it's the one that's most often asked about. Hydrangeas, yes, enjoy the blooms now. Enjoy all the pretty blooms as long as you like. If your blooms start to fade, it is very possible. Clip those right off. Clip that whole bloom right off and leave the stem there. Now, if you have some newer types of hydrangeas, it might be possible to get those to rebloom still yet. But you do want to generally prune your hydrangeas back by September, October. That's kind of the cutoff date on pruning those back for next year. So then they'll set bud during the winter time and bloom for you late spring, summer. So cut those old blooms back. So I thought I would dash over here and take a look at some of the window boxes that we planted earlier this spring. I see some coming through the fence nicely. So that is an encouraging sign. I see some blooms over here as well, coming through the fence nicely. So I like that. Oh, take a look over here. The basket's there. Let's see if I can't get a good shot here. And there is the house there. Wow, that makes a nice difference. Really has come on nicely. I like that. Now I want to come in and see these window boxes here, how these are doing. Let's take a look. So nice and full for sure. Oh my. Just truth in advertising, of course. Now I've come through and plucked a lot of the coleus back down. So you see this here. I've plucked this just to keep it down a little tighter and a little more rounding. So we'll check that back. We'll check back in a few weeks to make sure it's just still nicely rounded. Any improvements on this? I like the color scheme. Oh, one thing I learned on these window boxes this particular year. So helpful hint for gardeners next year or even this summer is that on these verbenas right here, I have stopped in several times to just deadhead, just plucking off the old dead blooms on there. And verbena is a little bit tricky because what they'll do is, let me see if I can't find one. See how this one right here is an original bloom, right? So that's the bloom, I mean, there's the bud and then the bloom. There's nothing underneath it. Let's see if I can't find one that I'm talking about. That makes it difficult to actually deadhead. Let's see. So on this verbena right here, take a look. So it has a beautiful bloom on it, right? But underneath it is layers and layers of old bloom. So it's a little more difficult to not pluck that. But what happens, it gets really long and leggy, and so you'll have a little bit of bloom on top. If we pluck that before it gets long and leggy, we can keep it a little tighter. So same with this guy right here on this one. Let's see if I can't see that. You see that there? Oops, I picked up the whole thing. But here's the bloom on top, and we're reluctant to pluck it because it's so beautiful colored, but there is all of this down here that starts to look messy, and this can get 6-8 inches, even a foot long. So if we pluck those back, keep it a little bit tighter, and yes, we're sacrificing a little bit of color today for a nice fresh batch of color next week or the week thereafter, and that will keep that verbena blooming. Let me show you what I'm seeing here. Take a look at that verbena just going to town. All nice fresh blooms rather than leggy summer blooms. Okay, so I'm kind of making it official then. So what I decided to do on this verbena here is, if I saw blooms that were taller than this, again, it's beautiful blooms on the outside, so I'm reluctant at first to pluck it, but you notice how it starts to get long and lanky in there. And I decided, well, if it gets 1 inch, 2 inches, I'll pluck those. Anything less than that, I won't. Now, I've always said in our passion baskets, these don't need to be deadheaded. But I have found on this particular window box that by deadheading them, we're getting a lot more blooms through the summer months. So I'm really happy about that. So pluck those verbenas, and I think you'll see a nice difference. Now, during midsummer, when we're looking over our plants, some plants are growing perfectly normal, just as they should, but they have grown perhaps a little bit out of proportion. Quite all right to trim that back, keep your basket in or container in proportion. Again, not entirely necessary, but underneath the basket as well. I'm taking a look. They look pretty good. Just a little bit, just a touch on the scraggly side. So I'm going to trim these guys, this vinca here, just up a bit, just to give a little sense of balance to the entire basket. And hopefully we can get these to bush out a little bit more for the fall and into the winter time. This midsummer checkup is really kind of a fun time. You get to see what you did well, get to see what maybe you can improve a little bit for next year on. And trimming, clipping, pruning, I always think it's just great. It's great emotional therapy. And by the way, some things don't need to be trimmed whatsoever. It's a great time just to enjoy. So Rebel Gardeners, it's all about a little bit of balance. Great time to look over the garden, maybe trim some things back that need to be trimmed to keep things balanced. Some things are outgrowing other companion plants, so trim those back. Some things don't need to be trimmed at all, but rather just stopped to be enjoyed. That's the show for the day. Always live your passion. Remember, don't be too hard on yourself.